How did she manage to bypass the alarm, climb onto the water tank without the use of a ladder, open the lid, and then wriggle inside of the tank itself, and then shut the lid, and then, drown? How did that happen? Hey, what's going on, guys? Mr. Ballin here. You probably know me from TikTok. Hopefully you're starting to get to know me on YouTube as well. Today we have a really fascinating mystery. And no, I'm not going to be saying that about every single mystery I do. I think I said that about the last one, the Dyatlov case one. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. But this one really is. It's probably in the top 5 of the most fascinating unsolved mysteries on the internet. And I think the reason is because there's this video footage. But there's really a remarkable story around that footage, and that's the story I want to tell. And that is the case of Elisa Lam. The too long didn't read version. Elisa is this young, smart, beautiful college student. She makes it to Los Angeles, and then she disappears. She was found dead in this water tank on the roof of this sketchy hotel, and there's video footage of her right before she winds up in the water tank, which is just totally bizarre. Elisa Lam was the daughter of Chinese immigrants. She was born in 1991 in Canada. She was an avid blogger. She was very into fashion. She also was dealing with some mental health issues. She had been diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. She had also been diagnosed as having depression. Even though her family initially was very close hold about detailing anything about her mental health struggles, they had never seen any suicide attempts or any suicidal ideations. On January 13th, 2013, Elisa Lam posted that she had just purchased her tickets to travel to San Diego, then on to Los Angeles, Santa Cruz, and then on to San Francisco. She was calling this her West Coast tour. So she heads off on this tour. She goes to San Diego, and then she takes an Amtrak train up to Los Angeles. And so she arrives in Los Angeles on January 26th, and she checks into this notoriously sketchy hotel called the Cecil Hotel, which is actually located right near Skid Row in LA. So it's a large homeless population, very high crime rate. And in fact, the Cecil Hotel itself, in addition to being located in a pretty seedy area, it had a fairly macabre history itself. It was actually famously associated with the Black Dahlia murder, where the victim had actually been at the bar inside the Cecil Hotel before she vanished. And then, including the Black Dahlia, there were 15 other non-natural deaths associated with the Cecil Hotel ever since it was built in the 1920s. And you would think that it would have been condemned, but in fact, LA has made it a landmark right now, so it's kind of protected, the hotel itself. But either way, she checks into the Cecil Hotel on January 26th, and initially she's put into a shared hostel-style room with some other tourists in the area. But it would come out in the investigation that she actually had to be moved out of that room due to the complaints of her roommates that, said she was acting very odd. And so they moved her to a private room. Now, Elisa was traveling alone. And if you combine that with the fact that, she was dealing with some mental health issues, her parents were very nervous about this trip. And so they had made this deal that in order for her to do this West Coast swing on her own, that she would need to check in with them every single night. And so she was doing that. So she takes off through San Diego, she checks into Cecil Hotel, she's checking in with them every night. But on January 31st, which was the day she was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel, she went silent. And her parents, who were all over this, immediately were very concerned, and they called the Los Angeles Police Department. The police acted very quickly on this case. They descended on the Cecil Hotel. They started looking everywhere. They interviewed hotel staff. They interviewed local businesses. They plastered her picture everywhere, and they couldn't find her. The hotel staff, they said that, we saw Elisa, and they did mention that she had been moved from the shared room to her own room, but that any interaction she had had with staff, which there weren't that many, was she was minding her own business. She was by herself, and she seemed like a totally normal guest of the hotel. There was a business owner. She owned a bookstore called The Last Bookstore, kind of ironic, who saw Elisa Lam. She was one of the last people to see Elisa, and she said that she was there purchasing gifts clearly for her family, little trinkets to kind of memorialize her trip through LA. But that was it. And so despite the massive attempts to find her, and this case had also gained quite a bit of media attention, not just in LA, but internationally. I mean, this was all the way back in China, where our family was from. I mean, this was making headlines everywhere. Despite all of that, no one could find Elisa. Then the police were given footage of Elisa in the elevator, and the police released that footage to the public, and it pretty much immediately went viral. No one can make sense of what the heck Elisa is doing in the elevator. She gets into the elevator, she proceeds to press all of the buttons, and then hides in the corner of the elevator. And then she starts poking her head in and out into the hallway as if she's looking for someone. And then eventually she kind of gets into the threshold of the elevator and starts moving her hands around kind of crazily, like she's either talking to someone or, I mean, it really looks like she's hallucinating or something. It's very bizarre hand gestures. And then she disappears. And that was the last footage we have of her alive. And what's even stranger is probably right after this video is taken, she goes to the rooftop by her own will, or someone made her go there, and she dies. So we're looking at the last few moments of Elisa's life. Now, the footage, despite its virality and despite how much more attention this gave the case, it didn't actually provide any big breaks, because the footage just captures this woman who seems kind of disturbed on the elevator. It doesn't give away really anything that actually happened to her. But after the release of that video, over the course of the next 2 weeks, guests of the Cecil Hotel started complaining about low water pressure, as well as a foul taste in the water. In fact, one of the guests even said that the water, when she turned it on, had come out black before clearing, and then it was clear water, but then the water had a foul taste to it. On February 19th, so this is now 2 weeks after her disappearance, and now following all of these complaints about the water, Santiago Lopez, who's a maintenance worker for the Cecil Hotel, he goes up to the roof and he goes to check on the water. He opens up the water tank to see what's going on, and there, lying in the water, is the body of Elisa Lam. So a couple things about the water tank itself. So it's on the roof of the hotel, and in order to get onto the roof, you would have to go through a door that has an alarm set. So you'd have to know the alarm code. Because if you didn't and you triggered the alarm, I mean, it goes off across the whole hotel. I mean, someone would have heard this alarm. Or you could have, I guess, taken the fire escape, but that's a fairly obvious thing, and someone would have noticed, and no one claimed to have seen her taking, the fire escape up to the roof. Then let's assume you've made it on the roof somehow, either by knowing the code to the door or using the fire escape. The tank, which is this 4-foot tall tank, is actually about 10 feet off the ground. And in order to get to the tank itself, you would need to use a ladder. And there weren't any ladders present. There's no ladders anywhere, right? But so even if you manage to climb onto the tank, without the use of a ladder, there are these heavy lids on the surface of these tanks. I mean, the hotel doesn't want people getting into the drinking water, so it's pretty well guarded. If you could get the tank to, I think it actually slides off, the opening to the tank isn't particularly large, so you'd have to wriggle your way into the tank. And then once you're in, it would be nearly impossible to shut the tank again. And the tank was shut when they found it. When Santiago Lopez went up there, the latch to the lid was undone, but the lid was covering the tank. So how did she manage to bypass the alarm, climb onto the water tank without the use of a ladder, open the lid, and then wriggle inside of the tank itself, and then shut the lid, and then, drown? How did that happen? Because her body had decomposed significantly, it was fairly difficult to run any sort of forensic testing to see what the heck happened to her. But the coroner was able to determine that this was an accidental drowning. As improbable as that sounds, that's what the coroner's report indicated. Amateur and professional sleuths alike are fairly divided on what actually happened to Elisa. Some say that if you look at the odd behavior complaints that have been made against Elisa by her roommates that first night at the Cecil Hotel when they had to move her to her own room, people point to that as, indicative of someone who had had a sort of psychotic break. And that, the footage of her in the elevator was just someone having a manic episode. And that's what caused all of this. And there's a fairly large contingent of people who believe that. Others say Elisa just committed suicide, that even though it was a complicated suicide, it was suicide nonetheless. And of course, because this is a very high-profile unsolved case, there are theories about this being, somehow connected to the paranormal or ghosts or any number of theory. But the bottom line is, despite knowing the who, what, where, and when, and having footage and timelines, we just don't know the why. The one thing that most people investigating this case can agree on is they really want the coroner's report to be re-examined. Not because there was negligence or something, but because there has to be something else there. This can't have just been another accidental drowning when just the circumstances surrounding her death are so bizarre, and just the likelihood of her being able to get onto the roof and up into that water tank without help is a little bit far-fetched. And so, unfortunately that hasn't happened, and for her parents, unfortunately, there's probably not going to be closure anytime soon. So that's going to do it, guys. If you haven't already, please smash like and subscribe to my channel. I'd love it if you turned on notifications as well. I'm really making a push to get more of these stories on my YouTube channel, looking to do 1 or 2 even every week. This is really my primary focus going forward, so please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Also, be sure to follow me on TikTok. My handle's the same as YouTube. It's Mr. Ballin. And then also on Instagram, it's John Ballin 416. Thank you all so much, and I'll talk to you guys soon.